polling from the Arab American Institute out Tuesday shows a historic drop in Arab American support for Joe Biden. While he enjoyed the support of 59% of the Arab vote in 2020, only 17% of Arab Americans say they'll support Biden in 2024, following his unequivocal support for Israeli strikes on Gaza that have now killed more than 8,000 Palestinian civilians. Although Arab American support had dropped to 35% before October 7th, and now it's halved since then.
The poll was conducted by John Zogby Strategies of 500 Arab Americans, with some answering online only. The poll has a margin of error of 4.9 percentage points. And while Arab Americans make up a small fraction of the voting electorate, this is the first time since the start of the poll in 1997 that a majority of Arab Americans did not identify as Democrats. 40% said they would vote for Donald Trump, up 5 points from 2020. 25% of Arab Americans are still undecided. 13.7% say they'd support RFK Jr., while 3.8% say they'd support Cornel West.
68% say the U.S. should not send weapons and military aid to Israel, and that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire. When asked about these polls, which could have an effect, a non-trivial one, on Biden's electoral chances in Michigan, where the Muslim vote was larger than his election margin, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had this to say.
Karine, I wanted to follow up on Anita's question about support among Arab and Muslim Americans. Polls are showing today that it's dropping significantly for the president. Is that a concern, and how will you address that?
So, look, I'm not going to get into every poll, right? So going to be careful. I think in Anita's question, it was related also to kind of the electoral race that's coming up. So I know you said you said that you were connecting your question to her, so I'm just making sure that I put that out there. I heard the question that you asked me. Look, of course, the president is always concerned and wants to hear how different communities feel about the work that he's doing. Of course, that's important to this president. And one of the reasons that he's going out there to go into rural America to hear directly from Americans there. One of the reasons that he does these travel, because he wants people to hear directly from him on the work that he's doing on behalf of Americans across the country. And so always, paying attention, listening to what different communities are concerned about. Obviously, that is important to this president. I'm just not going to go into every poll from here, but I get the question.
So I remember when Biden was first inaugurated or sworn into office in 2021 in January, there was some speculation that his tone towards Netanyahu could change, given the way Netanyahu decided he wanted to govern, the reforms he wanted to make, the changes to the Israeli constitution, and the dominance of the judicial system, which he saw as a problem, had a lot of pushback from within Israel. Blinken had to have meetings with Netanyahu about what democracy really means, which I think tells you exactly what is going on in Israel. One of our allies has decided they're going to take steps away from having a democratic state. This is how it goes down. And initially, people thought that there would be a tone change from Biden's typical, Bibi and I are still friends that he was saying in 2014. And they didn't get that. He was extremely pro-Israel. And so you have Biden getting 59% of the Arab American vote in 2020, delivering Michigan for him. And I think it dropped to 35% after they realized they were just getting more of the same Israel policy from him. As many Palestinians were being killed, he had called for a ceasefire in Gaza when the conflict escalated, but it came all too late. It's very obvious he's still extremely pro-Israel. And of course you're going to lose more votes. You're already at 35% in the Arab American community, and then October 7th, of course, it drops to 17%. I think it's only going to continue to decline. And it sounds like Karine Jean-Pierre unintentionally is giving away the electoral strategy. She's like, well, I can't comment on elections or things of that nature. It goes against, my constraints of my job. But she says Biden's going to go into rural areas across America and talk about what he's doing. So it sounds like she's saying, we are going to try and replace the Arab American vote with the vote of rural white voters, that we can fearmonger about the terrorism that's happening in the Middle East, people that they prey on who might not understand the conflict. It's dishonest to take that approach, but she's being very honest in revealing the electoral strategy, apparently, of the Biden administration.
I wonder if, when she said rural Americans, though, if she was talking explicitly about their messaging on the Israel-Palestine conflict, or more generally Biden's sort of posture as like the working class president, which is obvious BS based on everything he's done since being in office. And particularly, if that is their strategy, that they want to fearmonger about terrorism, like that, I don't think that's going to work because, well, one, these people are way smarter than any politician gives them credit for. And two, one of the reasons that Trump was able to break the blue wall in 2016 was not just because of promising to reshore manufacturing, but also because it is the working class whose sons and daughters, when they join the military, are the ones who are shipped off to fight these conflicts. So if Biden is going in telling them about how they have to go off to make the world a safer place for America, I don't see them buying that at this point, especially when the military is having a massive recruiting crisis and has shifted toward politics and away from combat readiness in so many ways. I think that Biden finds himself waffling on this Israel-Palestine issue in general because he wants to have it both ways. He wants to be the pro-Israel president, but he doesn't want to lose the pro-Palestinian base. And we saw this when Karine Jean-Pierre was asked last week a question about anti-Semitism and the reported rise of it in particularly on college campuses and in cities after the October 7th Hamas attack. And her immediate response was to talk about the alleged anti-Muslim sentiment that's been going around. And then in this answer, she pivots to talking about rural voters. So every time that she's asked about anything related to Israel-Palestine, she doesn't have a clear message. She doesn't have a clear stance. That could be due to the fact that she's bad at her job, and previous reports from the media have indicated that she's apparently not in these high-level meetings where decisions are made in the administration, which is a huge problem for the press secretary, the most forward-facing spokesperson for the administration. But it could also be that the administration itself doesn't have a clear strategy.
Yeah, and I think the messaging from Karine Jean-Pierre is a reason that they're losing a part of this vote. Think about being an Arab American, maybe you're Palestinian, maybe you have family in the region, and you see the Biden administration pretending like they don't know anything. When you have a spokesperson from the Department of Defense or what have you, they go on and they're questioned about the war crimes of Israel. You know, they're reporting 7,000 Palestinians are dead. They question whether or not the reporting from the Gazan Health Ministry is even valid when internally the State Department relies on the Gazan Health Ministry for the death toll. They say we have to confer with Israel and see if that number is really correct. They dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza at that point. This would average, less than 1.5 people killed per bomb dropped. I mean, of course, it's very possible that 7,000 Palestinians have been killed so far, but they play dumb in moments like that. And then in other moments, when you have airstrikes on hospitals in Gaza, suddenly the administration is very aware of where Hamas is operating. They have the intelligence to know who decided to launch that airstrike. We think it came internally from Hamas. So you have the amount of scrutinous detail to know where Hamas is in Gaza, but you can't say whether or not Israel has possibly killed 7,000 Palestinians. It doesn't make any sense. And so I think the messaging is also a huge reason why Arab Americans are straying away from supporting this administration.
Yeah, and I wonder, too, if the Biden administration is trying to be cautious in terms of how much vocal support they give to the pro-Palestinian contingent just because of how out of hand I would say some of the protests have gotten in terms of some fights have actually broken out, physical fights. I think everyone can agree that the actions of taking down posters of people who are being held hostage in Israel is completely uncalled for. There have been instances of anti-Semitism. And so I think perhaps they're trying to be cautious of separating themselves from that very, I would say, more radical contingent of some of the protests because those tend to get lumped in with the general pro-Palestinian movement right now because of how inflamed all of the tensions are.
I would like her to just simply say, we condemn any of the hateful acts, the protests, the violence. We are looking into whether or not Israel is committing war crimes.
Right.
We watch the news as well. We see the reports of it. It's like you could very easily say that. You could be an honest press secretary, but they've decided not to take that route.
Well, nothing new there, unfortunately. We'll be back with more Rising after this.